Hey, what's up everyone? Jason Turley here, back with more picoCTF. So I did already solve this SOAP challenge and I did record it. However, like a dunce, I did not have my mic on. I did not have audio. So everything I recorded is just me in complete silence. And you guys probably don't want to see that. You want some type of actual explanation. You don't want just me sitting in silent doing this challenge. So for those of you who do like when I do these raw, like live, first time experience, I'm sorry. You're not going to get that this time. I did already solve this challenge, but I will provide as much useful information as I can. So this challenge is called SOAP, and not necessarily like the soap you wash your body with. Hopefully, if I open up a new tab and I go to SOAP and let's say SOAP Internet Protocol, because the name of the challenges in Capture the Flag, they usually are an additional hint. So if the actual challenge doesn't have any hints like this, XML, external entity injection, sometimes the actual name of the challenge is a hint in its own right. So SOAP, Simple Object Access Protocol. It's a lightweight XML based protocol that is used for the exchange of information in decentralized distributed application environments. You can transmit SOAP messages in any way that the apps require, as long as both the client and the server use the same method. And if that didn't make any sense, we can also click on some pictures. Because pictures always are nice and they kind of detail and explain things when words kind of fail. Can I make this any bigger? Okay, I don't know why this URL is incredibly slow, but hopefully you guys can see this if I zoom in, and I might have to move myself out the way. But we see here, there's a sender and a receiver, much like in football, right? And we're sending an envelope. We're sending a request over HTTP and we're getting a response. So that just seems like regular traffic at this point, just regular HTTP traffic and how the internet works. If we want to get into more detail, we can continue to look at this here. We keep seeing the same envelope with the SOAP request and then a SOAP response. I don't know why these are like 240p, like these are very grainy, very low quality images. But anyway, in order to solve this challenge, we don't really need to know in-depth knowledge about SOAP or that protocol. What's more taxing, what's more pressing is knowing a bit about XML and what that is. However, I don't want to jump the gun too much. We didn't even look at the web portal. So let's look at this web portal and let's see what the actual challenge entails. All right, that's zoomed in to like 200%. So let's back up. Computer science. We have been ranked to be among the best universities in the world. And that is true. Carnegie Mellon University, CMU in Pennsylvania. It is a top-notch, top-tier, top 5 computer science institute. Just to like prove I'm not lying or just boasting. If we search computer science university rankings, something like that. The first result, US News and World Report. Click on there. All right, so we get the top candidates, the top scores. I don't know exactly what type of assessment or what type of criteria they're using, but I guess it is really no surprise that MIT is at number 1, with Stanford and UC Berkeley also being tied for that number 1 slot, and Carnegie Mellon University right under them at number 4. And then if we kind of peek and we look right underneath CMU, Carnegie Mellon, we do see this school called the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So as some of you may know, this is my alma mater. It is where I went to school. And I do have... That is where I went to school, out in the cornfields in Illinois, one of the top ranked computer science universities. And I do have this beautiful orange sash to prove it, along with the block eye. So I'm not going to pull off my degree off the wall, but just a quick little shout out, a quick little boast, a quick little flex. So not something I usually talk about or ever want to brag about, because going to college isn't necessarily a flex or a brag at all. However, it is kind of cool that the school is worth the investment in some type of way, shape, or form, and hopefully I didn't throw thousands of dollars down the drain. Anyway, I've sidetracked and I've distracted long enough. So let's play around with this actual website and see what's going on. So we see these three different menus, these three different options, and there's not really a lot to do or click on or drag, but there are these detail buttons, I guess, these buttons here. And we see as we click on them, we get different text at the bottom, these different pop-ups. So that's neat. But what can we do with this? Let's peek at the source code of the website. Okay, we see that there's some images. We can open that in a new tab. Okay, can we look at the static directory? Is there anything there? Is there any extra images or sensitive information we can pull? Not really. Not really. If we scroll down to the bottom, we can kind of see these two JavaScript functions, these JavaScript files being imported. So we can look at this. This looks kind of interesting, right? Application XML, so extended markup language. It's very similar to HTML, the hypertext markup language. So HTML is what you're seeing here, right? This is the backbone of basically the front end of a website. This is the text that gets displayed on screen, and HTML is like the skeleton of how it looks and how it's structured, right? So we see section tags, we see the title tag, picoCTF, that's the title of the page, different headers, images being linked, buttons, forms. So that's HTML. It displays what's on the page, and JavaScript is the code being run. So XML, we can peek here. I already pulled up this article. Extended markup language. It's basically a way for two different apps to communicate. So we saw the SOAP protocol, perhaps under the hood, it's using XML, extended markup language. So when we go here and we click on these details, right, where is it pulling this information from? Where is it actually getting this? It's not hard coded on the page. It must be somewhere else. It must be on some type of server. And XML is basically the mail carrier, or like the messenger who goes to grab that message and return it to you. So hopefully that makes a tiny bit more sense. We can start seeing data tags here. And we also have this other function that I won't dig into because it's not really relevant for the challenge. So, all right, this is cool. This is dandy, but how do we actually exploit any of this? XML, XXE injection, it's still not really making a whole lot of sense. So what we can do is open up Burp Suite, which is a web proxying tool. It's going to sit in between our client, our web browser, and then that far end server. And anytime we try to make a request, Burp Suite is going to sit and it's going to grab it and it's going to look at it. It's going to intercept it, much like someone in the NFL. And then it's just going to analyze it and we can make some type of decision. So if I come over here and I scroll down to proxy, right now the intercept is off. We want to turn that on. And let's go back to our web browser. Now, if we click on details, nothing different happens. What we have to do is actually tell our web browser to use a different port. Right now, it's using port 80 by default because that's the standard web communication port. I'm using this Foxy Proxy browser extension. It's very convenient. It's very useful. I click on options and open that up here. Go to proxies. We can see how it's configured. Host name is localhost and my port is 8080. You can change this to be whatever you want. If you don't want to install Foxy Proxy, that's completely fine. In Firefox, you can go down to your settings, type in proxy, network settings. Right now, no proxy is configured. That's the default on Firefox. You're not going to be using a proxy. So click here on manual proxy config. You see I already have one set for SOCKS 5 or SOCKS 4. That's not necessary for this challenge. So in HTTP proxy, specify the local host and then whatever port you want. You can do 8080 and then you click OK. And then everything would be sent there to Burp Suite because Burp uses 8080. So cancel, close out of this. I just like using Foxy Proxy. It's very quick, so I can easily enable and disable these proxies, which is a click. So now anytime I try to load some type of website or some type of page content, we see it automatically pops up here in Burp Suite. And if I want to actually send the request to the server, you just hit forward and now it's actually being sent. So we see here, created by security and privacy experts. But if I click on this one, right, it's intercepted, click forward, come back here, it's changed. So that's how the basics of a proxy work. Let's hit Control R to send this to repeater, so we can send multiple requests without having to go back and forth to Firefox. I can change the ID down here to 2. I can change it to 1, and we see we're getting the same different results as if we just clicked here. We can play around and we can fuzz. What happens if I do an ID of 0? Invalid ID 0. Okay, what about 4? Is there some type of hidden ID? No, invalid ID 4. So we see the structure of this XML here, very similar to HTML, right? We get the version and what type of encoding it's using, and then we get the tags. If this data tag looks familiar, we did see that in the JavaScript, right? We did see a data tag here, and then the for loop is iterating over some type of key. So how can we play with this? How can we actually fuzz and make this, exploit this? And let me turn off my proxy. I don't even think I read the challenge, did I? Did I even read what we're supposed to be doing? Let me refresh this page. The web project was Rust and no security assessment was done. Can you read the XXE password file? So XXE password, that's a common file that's on all Linux distributions. The name is a bit misleading. It doesn't really contain the actual passwords. Maybe I don't want to cat out the whole thing. Say head, XXE pass WD. Right? It doesn't actually contain the password anymore. It used to, but now it just contains an X, and then the actual passwords are stored in XXE shadow. But regular users cannot read that. The actual password hashes are stored in XXE shadow. So we want to read XXE password on the server, and we can do that utilizing XXE injection. So PortSwigger, they're a great resource, and they're actually the guys who created Burp Suite. So they really know what they're talking about when it comes to web vulnerabilities and web assessments. So what is an XXE injection? XML, external entity injection. It's a web security vulnerability that allows an attacker to interfere with an application's processing of the XML data. It often allows an attacker to view files on the application server file system. And we can also interact with the backend, and perhaps we can do some type of remote code execution, and we can actually gain a shell. But we see here, we can see this example with the attacker sitting on their computer, and they inject some type of extra code, extra syntax, XML information. And we see this doc type, something called stock check. And then in these backticks and these braces, we see the actual entity. So XXE is basically a placeholder. It's a variable that will be storing the contents of XXE password. And then we just reference that here. So that's cool. That's interesting. If I do continue to scroll down a little bit, we can read up more on it here. This is what a legitimate XML entry would look like. It's not too different than what we saw here. And if we want to exploit it, we can just copy and paste this. Similar to HTML, it does start with the doc type. So let's slam this. Where do I want to put it? Let's put it right here. And instead of specifying a value of 4, let's do ampersand XXE, and then close it out with a semicolon. Now when we click send, we still get invalid ID, but we also get all the contents of XXE password on that system. And we do get the flag picoCTF external, or XML external entity. So that's cool. And these little placeholders, foo and XXE, they don't really mean anything. They're just variables, they're just placeholders. So you can change this. If you don't want this to be foo, you can create it as please sub. And now when I send the request, oh, I have an exclamation point. That kind of ruins it. So if you change it to please sub with no special characters, it gets the same exact result. Likewise, I can change this to like ha ha ha. And then I would also need to change this down here. So don't get too hung up on like what these actually are. They can be anything. They don't really make a difference. As long as you reference the correct variable, you reference what's inside of these braces here. We can try to read some other files. I don't think we'll be able to read Etsy Shadow, but we can give that a shot. Yeah, whatever user we are, we don't have the correct permissions. Depending on what ports and protocols are open, maybe there's something in like var dub that we could read. But yeah, you guys get the idea. You can see how this opens up a whole can of worms, a bunch of vulnerabilities, or you can just read files on the file system. So that's really it for that one. I already submitted the flag earlier in the previous video that had no audio. So let me know how you guys solve this below. Any questions, comments, or concerns, I'd be happy to answer them in the comments down below. As always, take it easy and see you guys in the next video.